Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Modern Tales. Today we are going to talk about one of the most important and complex relationships in the world. One between the two modern global superpowers, United States and China. These two countries have been allies and enemies, partners and competitors, friends and foes over the past several decades. How did they get to where they are today? What are the main sources of their rivalry? And what are the implications for the future? Let's find out. The origins of the rivalry. The US and China have a long history of interaction, dating back to the 18th century when American traders first visited China. However, their relationship became more significant after World War II. Both countries were facing a common enemy, Japan. During the war, the U.S. supported China's nationalist government led by Chiang Kai-shek against Japan's invasion and occupation. The U.S. also helped China's communist forces led by Mao Zedong in a civil war against Chiang. The U.S. hoped that China would emerge as a strong and democratic ally in Asia after the war. However, things did not go as planned. In 1949, Mao's communists defeated Chiang's nationalists. He went on to establish the People's Republic of China, PRC, on the mainland, as Chiang and his followers fled to Taiwan, where they set up the Republic of China, known as the ROC. The U.S. refused to recognize the PRC and supported the ROC as the sole legitimate government of China. At the onset of the Cold War, U.S. and China became adversaries. The two countries were caught in a global struggle between democracy and communism. They clashed over Korea, where they fought on opposite sides of a bloody war, which ended in a stalemate in 1953. They also clashed over Taiwan, where China threatened to invade several times and the U.S. pledged to defend it. For the next 2 decades, the U.S. and China had no diplomatic relations and very limited trade. There were also virtually no cultural exchanges between the two. The two countries viewed each other as enemies and rivals for influence in Asia and beyond. The rapprochement. The situation began to change in the late 1960s, when both countries faced new challenges and opportunities. China was recovering from the turmoil of the Cultural Revolution, a radical political and social movement launched by Mao that caused widespread chaos and violence. The U.S. was bogged down in the Vietnam War, which lasted until 1975. It was a costly and unpopular conflict that undermined its credibility and morale. Both countries also faced a common threat, the Soviet Union, which had become more aggressive and hostile toward them. China had a border dispute with the Soviet Union that erupted into armed clashes in 1969. The U.S. feared that the Soviet Union was gaining an advantage in the nuclear arms race, expanding its influence in Europe and elsewhere. The U.S. and China began pursuing a new relationship based on mutual interests and pragmatism. In 1971, they made a breakthrough by allowing ping-pong players to visit each other's countries, an event known as ping-pong diplomacy. In 1972, President Richard Nixon made a historic visit to China. The U.S. president met and conversed with Mao and Premier Zhou Enlai. They issued a joint communique that established the basis for normalizing relations, agreeing to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and to seek peaceful resolution of disputes. The two countries would also cooperate on various issues and work together to reduce tensions in Asia. While both agreed that there was only one China, the two countries differed on its interpretation. The U.S. acknowledged that China considered Taiwan part of its territory. The country, however, did not recognize or support Beijing's claim. Meanwhile, China insisted that Taiwan was an inseparable part of its territory that must be reunified by force if necessary. The U.S. and China established formal diplomatic relations in 1979, when President Jimmy Carter severed ties with Taiwan. The U.S. also passed the Taiwan Relations Act, which authorized unofficial relations with Taiwan and provided for its security assistance. The US and China developed a strategic partnership that balanced against the Soviet Union. and promoted stability and prosperity in Asia. The competition. The U.S.-China relationship entered a new phase after the end of the Cold War in 1991. The Soviet Union collapsed, and around the world, communism lost its appeal. The U.S. emerged as the sole superpower in the world, while China embarked on a rapid economic transformation that lifted millions out of poverty. The U.S. and China continued to cooperate on some issues, such as trade, climate change, counterterrorism, non-proliferation, and public health. They also maintained people-to-people exchanges that fostered mutual understanding and respect. However, they also faced growing challenges and conflicts over other issues, such as human rights and democracy. Ongoing issues of Taiwan, Tibet, Hong Kong, the South China Sea, cybersecurity, intellectual property, and trade practices. They also competed for influence and resources in regions such as Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. The U.S. and China developed a complex relationship that was described as cooperative competitive, or strategic competitors. They recognized the benefits of cooperation, but also the risks of confrontation. The two tried to manage their differences, but also to defend their interests and values. The U.S. and China entered a new era of rivalry under the administrations of President Donald Trump and President Xi Jinping, who both adopted more assertive and nationalist policies. Trump launched a trade war with China, imposing tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, while accusing China of unfair trade practices and currency manipulation. At the same time, the U.S. increased military and diplomatic support for Taiwan, challenged China's claims and actions in the South China Sea, blamed China for the COVID-19 pandemic, and criticized China's human rights violations in Xinjiang and Hong Kong. Xi consolidated his power and pursued his vision of making China a great power that can shape the international order. He expanded China's military capabilities and presence in the Indo-Pacific region, and advanced China's Belt and Road Initiative that connects Asia, Europe, and Africa through infrastructure and investment projects. Xi promoted China's model of governance and development as an alternative to Western democracy and liberalism. He also cracked down on dissent and opposition in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and elsewhere. The U.S. and China entered a state of strategic confrontation that some analysts called a new Cold War, or a Thucydides trap, a term that refers to the inevitable conflict between a rising power and an established power. They engaged in a comprehensive competition that spanned not only economic, but also military, scientific, technological, ideological, diplomatic, and cultural domains. They also faced the risk of escalation or miscalculation that could lead to a military conflict, or a decoupling of their interdependent economies. The future. The U.S.-China relationship is at a critical juncture under the administration of President Joe Biden, who faces the challenge of defining and implementing a new strategy toward China. Biden has signaled his intention to cooperate with China on global issues such as climate change, pandemic response, and nuclear proliferation, while competing on regional issues such as Taiwan, the South China Sea, and human rights. He has also pledged to work with allies and partners to counter China's influence and behavior. China has expressed not only its willingness to resume dialogue and communication with the U.S., but also its determination to defend its sovereignty and interests. It demanded the U.S. to respect its core concerns on issues such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, Tibet, and the South China Sea. It has also warned the U.S. not to interfere in its internal affairs or undermine its development. The U.S.-China relationship is likely to remain competitive and contentious in the foreseeable future, as both countries pursue their national interests and values in a changing world. However, it is also possible for both countries to find areas of cooperation and coexistence that can benefit themselves and the world. The future of the relationship will ultimately depend on the choices and actions of both leaders and peoples. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe for more amazing history stories. See you next time.